This was told to me by my childhood bestie's uncle during a family gathering in the early 90s. They were a huge family and always had cookouts and gatherings, often inviting friends from church or work, so there would always be a nice crowd, and sometimes it went into the evening. This night, some of the men there were police officers, so they were trading stories. While the grown-ups were talking, we preteens were sitting nearby talking kid stuff, but I noticed the grown-ups' tones kind of changed, and I turned around to listen. So for context, we are a small town right at the edge of the two different tribal reservations. The sheriff's office usually patrolled a 30-minute stretch of reservation that bordered the two different tribal lands. It's a flat forest that is beautiful during the day, but scary as hell during the night. There is one gas station / grocery store in a little community right in the middle of this 30-minute drive. It closed at around 9 p.m. each night. Around 11 p.m., one of the sheriffs got a call over the radio to check something out just south of that community. Now that area was the most isolated, and there are very few people that lived there. There's no streetlights other than some out on the stretch of lands where people lived, so this part was a very dark area. The officer went out to the area, and I don't remember if he found a problem. My vague memory is thinking that it had to do with the fence down, which is bad because some people have herds of sheep, cows, horses, so that could cause an accident. He took care of business and started back towards our town. He had only driven about a mile back when he saw a man walking on the side of the road. Again, on this stretch of road, it is very dark. People can be hit by a car, so the officer stopped to at least get the guy home. The man was young, quiet. He had long black hair. His clothes were old and dirty. Often there are hitchhikers that go from that area to our town to hit the bars and then hitchhike home. But this man was going in the direction towards the town, which was weird because it was way past midnight by now. Nothing was open. The officer tried to get the man's address, but the man just said, "Take me down the road. I'll tell you when to stop." And it was toward our town, and the little community was also ahead, so that was probably where he was headed. The sheriff had a truck. When one picks up a hiker, they climb in the back and hit the window when their destination is reached. The officer said, "All right, jump in," and started down the road. While driving, he'd take a look back and see the back of the man's black hair. After time was going by, and the man wasn't knocking on the window, and they passed the community and the houses were very few again, the officer decided to look back at the man again, and he was gone. Now, if he was drunk, which he didn't seem to be when they spoke, he was probably passed out and missed his turn. He pulls over and thinks he's going to wake this guy up. He looks, and there is no one in the back. The cop is like, "What the heck? Tell me he didn't jump out. He has to be drunk." The cop turns around and tries to backtrack. He passed the community again, but he doesn't see anyone laying on the road, or sitting, or even walking. He turned into the gas station and kinda tells the dispatch about it, and then decides just to head back to town. While driving, he says that he starts to hear a knocking on the truck. It wasn't the back window. And at the gas station, which had lights even though closed, he did double check for a passed out man. The knocking continues, and he keeps driving but starts to look in all of his mirrors, and he swears he sees a wolf-like figure at the right side of his truck, running alongside of it, on its hind legs, banging the side now. He is going 55 to 60 miles an hour at this point, and this creature didn't look like it had any problem running right next to the truck, hitting it. The officer swerved and overcorrected, but gets control and stops. but he stops for a second just to check his doors and get his wits, and then hauls ass. He stated that he was going 80 to 90, and the road can be curved, so the speed limit is still 55 to this day. He was so terrified, and he was so relieved when he went over the little hill to our town and saw the city lights. I never forget this story, and I drive that road rarely, but never at night. I saw some videos about skinwalkers on TikTok, so I started watching videos about them on YouTube, and there was a whole podcast where this guy just read stories about them from Reddit and other stories that people submitted. Well, our ward at church purchased a piece of land way back in the day. It's seriously just a wooded area with a little bit of swamp. Anyways, we would always go there for campouts and scouts. And at night, when it was pitch black, we would all play manhunt. Well, one time, we all got down to one person whose name was David. Growing up, he was super fast, and he would hide really good so nobody could ever find him. He would always end up being the last person. Well, one time, it was down to David, and we had split up and gone way deep into the forest toward the swamp because it seemed like it was impossible to find him. We thought he might have gone down a little further than we usually go, and we started getting into some more muddy and wet terrain as we got closer to the swamp-like area where the water is probably shin deep, and we saw David way out in the swamp, but he wasn't wearing any shirt, and with the spotlight on him, he looked super pale. But he just stood there and didn't say a word. You could seriously tell that something was off. Then, all of a sudden, we heard David from behind us, yelling, trying to get our attention so we could keep trying to chase him down. Meaning, what we saw in front of us was definitely not him. So, being a bunch of 12 to 17-year-old boys, we started yelling and running back to the campsite as quickly as we could. Nobody believed us. In fact, for years everybody made fun of it, calling it the ghost of David. But then I started listening to these stories, and every single one of them sounds just like what happened in some way or another. I do believe that this was a skinwalker encounter. To give you a little more insight about me, this story happened when I was 14 years old. I was at my friend Emily's house, since back then I lived there for personal reasons. Anyways, it was about 1 a.m., and her parents were gone for the night at her grandma's house. We were watching horror movies and vegging out on snacks like we usually would every weekend night. After our movie, I got up to go pee and let her know that I'd be back. She nodded before opening up her laptop to message her boyfriend at the time. As I walked down her barely lit hallway and came across the bathroom, I heard Emily's voice call out to me, to her back porch that was on the right side of the hallway, which immediately struck me as odd because I never saw her leave the room or even walk past me. And why would she be outside, anyways? Her voice called to me again, so I couldn't help but walk out to the back porch. It took a lot to scare me, so I wasn't bothered by this. This turned out to be the biggest mistake ever. A red flag should have went off right then and there when her voice became silent as I stepped onto the porch. I called her name softly, but she didn't reply. I called her name once more, but this time louder. And again, silence. I stepped off the porch onto the grass, looking into her wooded backyard, a little pissed now, because at the time, I figured she was trying to prank me, like she usually did. It was normal for her. But when I yelled her name again, a voice spoke. But it wasn't hers. It was another woman's voice. "Help me, please. For the love of God, help me." I heard a woman scream. Okay, now I was officially freaked out because there was no one around for miles besides her one neighbor that lives a little ways into the woods. I found myself not being able to move. Curiosity, maybe, but the bushes started rustling and what looked like a dog stepped out. My first thought was it was her neighbor's dog that must have gotten out because it has happened before. But when this thing stood up on its hind legs, it was about 7 feet tall. That's when I really froze up. What the hell was this thing? I asked myself. I've never met anyone that's that tall in my entire life. When it started to walk towards me, I eyed it carefully. It was walking kind of like a human, but wobbling like a baby taking its first steps. I found myself not being able to bolt out of there like I should have. I couldn't move. That is, until I heard the slider door being opened and the real Emily's voice speak. "Lana, what are you doing out here? I looked around my whole house for you." As soon as she finished her sentence, I bolted as fast as I could and pulled my friend inside before shutting the door and locking it while closing the blinds. I did this to every room, even the basement, locking windows included. All the while, Emily yelling at me, asking me what the hell was going on. I took her arm and raced into her room before slamming the door behind us. When she finally realized how terrified I was and how badly I was shaking, only then did she ask me, "Jesus, Lana, what's the matter? You look like you've just seen a ghost. What the hell happened?" I finally calmed down enough to begin telling her what I encountered. But before I got the chance to fully explain what happened, I heard extreme banging on my friend's window, which stunned us both, and we both shot up at least 10 feet in the air. I whispered "fuck" when I realized I forgot to shut her blinds. I didn't have the heart to turn around. But when Emily's face went pale, I didn't have a choice but to look behind me. I really wish that I hadn't. There, that thing was, looking into our bedroom window. I couldn't even begin to explain what it looked like. All I can come up with is that its body was twisted like somebody had just been in a freakish car accident. And it had fur, lots of it, and the eyes glowed much like a cat. A high-pitched noise escaped that thing's throat, making us not only cover our ears, but we both screamed as hard as our lungs would let us. I threw my friend on the floor before zooming into her parents' room to get her dad's .42 rifle. But when I arrived back, the noise stopped, and that creature was gone. Emily was rocking back and forth, holding her knees close to her, shaking and crying hysterically. She's seen its face as clear as I did, and the antlers that it happened to have. To say we were absolutely terrified would be a major understatement. The rest of the night, we had all the lights on in the house, and we stayed huddled together in the living room with the rifle right under my legs. Finally, after what seemed like decades, the sun rose, and her parents walked through the door. Almost instantly, her dad noticed our fear-stricken expressions and his gun under my legs. They sat down and softly asked us what happened. When I explained it, they shared worried glances before announcing that we were moving. We never asked why. We were just happy to get the hell out of there. We moved that exact day to my family's vacation home in a very populated city with little to no trees. When my parents got home and we told them, they had the same reactions and told me I could never go out after dark alone and to stay away from wooded areas. Of course, I never questioned it. To this day, I don't know if it was a skinwalker. What I do know, though, is that it was not human. Alrighty, you guys, I hope you enjoyed these stories. If you did, go ahead and leave a like on this video, and please consider subscribing. Also, let me know what you think about the story in the comments section below. I'll see you guys in the next video. Peace.